next is the Intro to Node and Express workshop. Okay, so how the workshop is going to go is we have two parts. We're going to have the first part, which is before lunch. Hopefully lunch gets here on time, and the sandwiches aren't really small. But we have burritos today from the local, so that's exciting. But so two parts. First is going to be a workshop where it's a workshop. Y'all aren't actually going to be doing things on your own. You can follow along if you want, but the point is I'm going to be doing things and walking you through the code. Okay, so that's part one. And then part two is going to be where, for the most part, you guys actually get to do stuff. I'm going to walk after lunch. We'll take part one, lunch. Part two, I'm going to do a couple of things to show you how to build routes or things like that, and then there's 3 challenges for y'all to try and complete. Okay, so cool workshop. Move things around a little bit. Yeah, if you want to follow along, feel free. Let's see what's the best way to do this. Okay, so can y'all see that? Should I zoom in or a little more as I can? Raise your hands if I should zoom in. All right. All right, cool. So the first thing we're going to do is create a Hello World app. And right now, you can see my directory is empty. I'm going to use this tree executable. It's not really part of the class, but it's just going to show you my current directory. And I'm in 10. Okay, so create a Hello World Node script. This is what we're going to do first. I'm just going to open hello.js in them. Okay, so this is just a JavaScript file. So how do we print in JavaScript? So we yell it out. Console.log, all right. So let's write a quick comment. Oops. Okay, console.log. Hello. So question, whenever you run JavaScript in the browser, and you console.log something, it goes into the, can y'all see it? Okay, good. It goes into the console that gets logged into is the developer console, right, in your browser. So where do we think that this hello world is going to get logged? Where do we think we're going to see this hello world? All right, let's find out. Cool, so that's all we need for now. And then to run it, we're going to do node and then hello.js. And okay, cool. So what we see is it actually prints to our console, to our terminal. So that's different, right? Because previously on the client side, the JavaScript was running in our browser. So when it printed things, it printed them out to our browser. But now because we're running in Node and on our actual computer, right, rather than in the browser, it's just on our computer. The way we're interacting with our computer is through the terminal. So when we're logging things, it logs out to the terminal. Okay. So, cool. So this is our Hello World node, little node script. So now what we're going to do is, and this is just Node. This is not Express. Right? This is just NodeJS. So now what we're going to do is create a Hello World Node plus Express web app. So let's remove this. Okay. For an example of how a tree looks, this is how our directory looks right now. But so this is how our directory looks. It's empty, no directories, no files. So, okay, cool. So remember I mentioned Express Generator, and we're going to use that to set up the boilerplate. So we're going to use Express, and hopefully everyone has Express Generator installed. It was part of the installation guide. Quick refresher, if you don't, you just want to use npm install -g Express Generator. If that doesn't work, should have gotten your check off. So, but we can help you during launch potentially. Okay, so confusingly enough, Express Generator is run with the keyword express. Unfortunate and a source of confusion, but so express and then --HBS. This is basically telling it to use handlebars for templating. If you don't know what that means, that's okay. But the idea is, us as a staff and a lot of people dislike the defaults that Express Generator uses in terms of templating, so we're going to use this. Okay, and so here we can see a list of all of the files and folders that were just created. Some nice, pretty cyan create messages. And so yeah, express-s HBS. And then let's see what our directory looks like. Okay, so at the root we have app.js, bin, package.json, public, routes, and views. But we've only got two things. We've got 4 directories and 2 files, right? So these 2 files at the root must be really important. And in fact, surprisingly enough, they are. So first, let's go over sort of how NPM is important in this. So NPM interacts with 2 primary parts of your project structure, and that's package.json and we'll see in a second, node modules. So what do we want to do? Oh, cool. So we need to, so right now, all we have is, let's see, do we have? Yeah, okay, cool. So right now, let's do, yeah, okay. So the first thing you need to do is, actually we'll go over the directory structure a little bit. Let's just get the hello world working. Okay, so the first thing you need to do is Express Generator created a list of other libraries that you need to download and install in order to run your program. So we're just going to install them with npm install. So npm install, and this is going to take, actually we don't have a, where's our node modules? Oh, I don't know, we don't need it. Okay, so npm install, and that's going to take our list of code of libraries that we need to install and actually just install it. Okay, we'll go over what this means in a little bit, but for now, just that means that everything was installed properly. And then npm start. So this is going to start our web server. We get a little message down here of what's going on. And then over in our browser, let's go to localhost :3000. I don't know if you can see it, so I'll write it right here, but it's localhost 3000, :3000. What this means is not super important right now, but the idea, but localhost means I want to find something that is living on my current device. So remember before how I said that server and client are generally separate across the internet, they're different computers. The slight point of confusion here is that we're running both the client and the server on our own device. So localhost just means, go ahead.
Why do we use npm to start the web server? Isn't it getting the package manager?
Right, it is. I don't really know why they did this, but npm decided, I mean, it has a lot of nice properties, but npm expanded to be sort of a script runner as well. So npm runs start, or npm start, we can go over it in a little bit, but the idea is that it runs a script that we've written elsewhere, or that Express Generator wrote for us. So npm is not really doing a lot of the lifting, it's just pointing right at what to run. Right, so localhost is just our computer, and then :3000 means port 3000. That's also not important, but the general idea is there's different ports on the computer. Okay, so localhost 3000, and hey, there we go, Express. Welcome to Express. So this is our Hello World app. Okay, cool. So that's nice. So let's go back to understanding the directory structure. Well, first down here, this is actually I can't type anything, right? This terminal's been taken over by Node. It's actually running my web app in this terminal, right? But I can do Control-C on my device at least, and that will cancel out, that will close down my web server. And so if I go back to localhost 3000, Safari can't connect to the server, right? Because it's no longer running over here. Okay, so now let's understand a little bit of what NPM is doing. First of all, there's two things important about NPM. Package.json and node modules. And the most important of those is package.json. You can think of package.json in terms of NPM projects as the source of truth. Anytime you see a new NPM project, the first thing you should do is open up package.json or the README, but package.json, because this shows you what is going on, what's happening, why things are the way they are. Okay, so remember, this is just a JSON object. This is just a key and a value. So this is the idea of package.json is it's just a lot of information. It's either meta information or it's pointing at different parts of your app. So the name of this app is temp, which is just from the file that we're in. Version's not really important for what we're doing. This is not really important. Scripts, okay. So remember we had the question of why do we do npm start? Technically what I should have more formally is npm run start. And what npm run does is it says I want to run a script. And specifically here, I want to run a script called start. And you could guess that it finds that script right here. Right? It looks in the scripts object and it says, okay, I have a script called start and it means do this. And we'll go over this bit in a second as well. But for now, it just means, okay, I want to run the start script. And then it has a list of dependencies. So what are dependencies? Remember how I said you have other code that you want to run, right? You have other code that other people have written, right? We didn't write Express. We didn't write like a cookie parser or anything. We didn't write handlebars, but we still want to use their library. So the idea of these dependencies is you can list out the name of what library you want to use, then what version you would like to use of that library you'd like to use here. And then when you do npm install, the package manager is smart enough to say, okay, this list of dependencies, I'm going to go grab that code that you requested, download it, and install it for you, which is super nice. Okay, so back to the start script. Can somebody tell me what would happen if I typed into my terminal node.bin/www? Yep. So remember we have bin, and what's in bin? It's just www, which is a script. The script contents is not really that important for this part of the class. It just starts your web server. So if you did bin, node bin, and then www, you're exactly right. The same thing happens. It gives you less information because you're skipping a little bit of the niceness, but yeah, it's the exact same thing. But it's good practice to use npm scripts because it's a familiar language for developers, right? Or between your team. It's much easier to type npm run start or npm start than to figure out where www is, or if it has a different name, or if you're starting your web server differently. So npm scripts are a great tool. Okay, so we talked about package.json, and then the other part is node modules. So node modules, let's take a look at this. Oh man, we got all this stuff in here. There's like a whole bunch of different directories. And what these directories are is just libraries, right? Libraries of other people's code that other people have written that we want to use. And so, question, in package.json, we only have like what? 7 dependencies? Why do we have like 40-ish in node modules? Anybody have a thought on that?
I'll have dependencies.
Right, exactly. Because in package.json, each of these dependencies also has their own dependencies. That's exactly right. So what node modules is it's just, if we actually, let's see, npm list. npm list shows you, so, right, body parser, cookie parser, express, for instance, right? This is a tree, and at the top level are our dependencies, the dependencies for our app, the libraries that we need. But then at the second level, you can see that express has a dependency on accepts, or array flatten. The names of these aren't really important right now. The dependencies of your dependencies, not that important. But that's the idea of node modules. So specifically, what's nice about it is it's just a folder that you can mostly ignore for the vast majority of what you're going to do. And for this class, I would say, you can just ignore it. But the reason it's nice is you can run code without having to install it like with root permissions, right? Normally, if you want to run like Node or things like that, sometimes you have to like install, to run the executable, you have to install it in your folder. It's very clean, it's very simple, and it makes things a lot easier. Okay, any questions on npm or package.json or node modules? Okay, cool. So that's npm. Now what we're going to do is actually look at some of the things that are Express specific, that Express generator set up for us. So first is app.js. This is the second of two files that are at the root of our directory. So it's important. Okay, so we have about 46 lines of boilerplate. And up here we have a bunch of var whatever equals require something else. Two ways to think about this. One, this is exactly the same in Python as writing import express. This is for our purposes, pretty much just exactly the same thing. The only difference is you're creating a variable called express that holds all of the contents of your import. Now, under the hood, what this actually does is right here, this goes into node modules and says, do I have a directory in node modules with the name express? If I do, run that code, pull out an object of information, and then assign it to the variable express. How that actually works is not important, but just know that you're importing. So that's what all of this is. Now, question. Here we're doing something similar, but it looks like /route/index. This is what's going on here. Anybody have a thought? Like, why can't I just do var index equals require index? Right, it's local code, exactly. So let's look outside of this. So we have the routes directory, and then if we list what's in routes, we see that we actually have an index file. So the difference between the two is that here, these are like third-party applications that we're importing that are stored in node modules. Whereas this style of require, is you're requiring code that is in your own directory, either that you've written, or in this case, that Express generator created for you. And we'll look at routes and route index and routes and other things like that in a little bit. But, okay. So here what we're doing is we're saying app equals express call as a function. Why we do this is not really important. If you want to understand why, just look at the Express documentation, but just trust that this is creating your web app. Okay, this is creating your view engine. We'll go into more detail on this tomorrow during the templating session, but this says where to find your views, which is like your HTML sort of, and this says how we want to render those. And we'll look at this a little bit more in a second. This is saying I want to use middleware. And this is the point of middleware, that it just adds a bunch of functionality to your web app. You can use third-party middleware, or you can write it yourself. But the point of this is it just adds things like, oh, I want to be able to parse cookies. Most of us know what cookies are, the general idea. So this says I want to use the ability to parse cookies. Not super important. This is saying, we'll get to this in a second, but okay. Okay, this specifically is the start of routes. I'll get to them in a second when we get to the routes folder. But this is saying at the root directory, at the root of our app, I want to use index, which we can search for index, and we see that this is what we imported, right? Route/index, and we'll come back to this. All right, and then from here down is not really all that important right now. It's basically setting up some good defaults, such as, oh, if I try and go to a part of the app that there's no route for, then it'll give you a 404 page, which basically says, we don't know what you're looking for. And this is how to job handling errors. And then down here, module.exports. What this does is it says, if some other file wants to require this current file, then you'll actually import the variable app, which is what we've been updating here, right? And here, and here. Okay, so that's a quick overview of app.js. If it's confusing, don't worry. One, there's a lot of documentation on the Express website. Two, we're about to go over parts of it in more detail as we investigate the rest of the directory structure. Okay, so now is a good time to go over what a README is. So README, as the name might imply, is begging the developer to read it. And I would say even before you go into package.json, if you see a README, you should read it. And more than that, whenever you're building your web app, it's always a good idea, even in this class, to just, if you make something that's important, or you do something that was confusing and you figure it out, or you don't want to forget something, just go ahead and write it down in the README. Because what a README is, among other things, is it's just a list of information. So this is a Hello World app. So it's readme.md, meaning it's a Markdown README. If you know Markdown, that's cool. Feel free to use it. If you don't, you can just write it, just pretend that it's a text file, and that's all good. That's what we'll do here. So this is just pieces of information, right? So generally at the top, you want to have an overview, a 1 to 2 sentence overview of what your app is or what it does. And then you can add optional other information, such as this. Okay. Cool. So for now, we don't really have much to write in the README, but the idea is this is a good place to jot down notes, because it'll be saved with Git, and it'll be shared with all of your teammates. All right, so now the meat of this part is looking at the other directories. We have bin, other than node modules, we have bin, public, routes, and views. I think we'll do public last. So bin, routes, views, and public. So first of all, bin. In your computer's file system, bin generally references like a list of scripts. And it's the same thing here. It means bin is a list of scripts that should be run on the server side, so from this terminal. Now, there's a difference between scripts that are run in your browser and scripts that are run from your server or in your terminal, right? In your browser, a JavaScript script could say, hey, I want to edit this DOM element, or hey, I want to figure out what today's date is and add that to some part of my web page, right? But in Node, what our bin actually is it's storing right now just the script to actually start our web server. We can take a quick look at it. Not important, but this is saying, hey, I want to use Node to run this, and this is like creating the server, setting the port, things like that. If you want to look through it or you want to ask questions about it, that's totally cool, and I can answer questions afterward. But for most web apps, the vast majority, editing www will be superfluous. Okay, so that's what bin is. So if you have scripts, most of the time you won't actually be using bin, but let's say that you built a web app and you decide that you want to do web scraping. I don't necessarily recommend it, but if you wanted to, the web scraping would generally occur on the server side, and so you could put a web scraping script in bin, right, in your bin directory, for instance. Okay, so that's bin. Now, routes. Okay, so I'm going to stand up for this. So what are routes? Well, remember how over here, let's say we had, let's try size. All right, we have Facebook. .com. This is the internet location, or the location on the internet. And I'm like really, this isn't like all technically correct. I'm simplifying a little bit, but for our purposes, this is Facebook.com is the location on the internet, right? When you're hopping from your device to some other point and then asking Facebook's server for something, the way you get from here to here is with Facebook.com. This is called Facebook.com, is this server, right? You can think of it like that. But what if you, instead of going to Facebook's default page, you wanted to look at your profile? I don't know what it actually is, but let's say it's this, /profile, right? You've all seen the slash notation. /profile. And this is like your own personal profile, right? So is this going to a different server, or what's happening here? The thing is, it's not actually going to a different server. What's happening is this part here, right, is getting you to the Facebook server. But then within Facebook server, it has like a list of things, right, like that it can return to you. Your profile, your account information, right, your news feed, things like that. It has a list of different pages you can visit. And what this is, this list of different things you can visit, are routes. You can think of it as almost a file system on this server. Not exactly the same, but you can think of it like that. So let's say I wanted to look at somebody's profile, right? Profiles / Monday, right? Right? So it's like, it's hierarchical is the idea, right? That's how routes work. We'll look at it right now, actually, a specific example. So that's the idea of routes. That this part is the route. Okay, so let's start this up. Okay, quick question. What route are we at right now? Okay, we'll look at it. So let's see, let's go into routes. So what we have right now is index and users. We're just going to ignore users for now. It's not really important for our purposes, so we're just going to look at index. And we see that the only thing we have is something that is just a slash here. And so this slash, you see how there's a slash here, right? This is actually part of the route. This is like the root of your route. This is whenever you visit a page, the route that you're going to generally is just slash. Okay, so let's look at index.js. So we have express equals require express. This is, as we saw before, just importing express from node modules. And then router is a variable that's gotten by calling some function that express holds, that the express object holds. Right, cool. So now what we're doing here at an overview is actually creating this route. So first of all, if I just commented this out, if I just commented that out and did this again, we get a 404. And so what's happening is the web app is receiving the request, but it's like, I don't have any routes that I can offer you. So I'm just going to send you a 404 page, meaning I didn't find the route that you requested. So that's what this is doing, right, is actually setting up this root route. And sometimes they'll take the slash off, but it's actually there. Okay, so now a description of it. Adding a description to your routes is very important, even if it's one word, but preferably a couple of words, like one line description, because routes generally won't be one line. They'll be like, hopefully not 100 lines, but they'll be like 20 to 30 lines potentially. Some of mine when I took this class were very long, and unfortunately did not do a good job of managing complexity. But the point is, you don't want to have to read through all of that to try and figure out what's going on. Just save yourself some trouble and write that this is getting the home page. Okay, so this is router. This is what we just imported right here. And then .get. What is .get? Well, whenever you're making a request, remember how in the client-server model we had two parts, right? We had the client and the server, the requester and the responder. So whenever you're making a request, there's types of requests, which is a really nice thing because it gives hints to the server as to what you mean or what you want. There are a whole bunch of types, but the two that we're really going to use are get and post. Now, the difference between get and post. Get says, I want to get this information onto my personal computer. I want to get some web page or get this Wikipedia article or things like that. It is nullipotent, meaning it doesn't change part of the website. It's good practice, right? So that's get. So then post is saying, I want to post this update to the site, or I want to post this picture to Facebook, or I want to post this change to my password, or things like that. So the idea is get doesn't actually change anything. Post does change something, right? A part of the site. Now, you can finagle the two to perform each other's actions, but the idea is that it's good practice to use them for what they're designed for. Get for getting things, post for making changes. Okay. So now when we see router.get, this means we're making a get request at the, here we see root of our route, of our web app. So we could change this to post, but then this wouldn't work because whenever you type into the browser here, you're making a get request. But we'll see some examples of post requests during the second part of the workshop, part 2. Okay, and then we have a callback as the second argument, right? An anonymous function, rec, res, and next. So rec, res, and next. Well, first of all, it's slightly confusing because rec is actually short for request, right? It's an object that contains a bunch of information about the request that's going to be made. And then res is short for response, which contains a bunch of information that you can update about the response that you send back, or actions that you can take in terms of the response. And then next is not short for anything, it's short for next. Right now, all you need to worry about is rec and res. Next actually calls the next piece of middleware. Specifically, router.get is middleware, but not important right now. Just worry about rec and res. If you want to learn about how in depth on how routing works and what the point of next is, you can read through Express's documentation. I actually do very much recommend it. It's surprisingly spectacular documentation. Okay. All right. So now we just have this one line, res, which is our response from here, right? And then dot render. Well, so question, what does dot render do? Well, let's actually look up the documentation for it. So we're going to search Express documentation. Okay, Express 4.x API reference. So things like API reference documentation, API documentation, things like that. That's what you're looking for in terms of like Node or Express. As a quick aside, if we want to figure out how Node works, how like we can either do like, let's say you want to interact with your files system, right, with Node. You could do Node interact, like open file, right? And you'd probably get some stack answers, but the better way, or if you have extra time, you could just you could search Node documentation. I like Express's documentation a lot better, but Node is very thorough and has a lot more features. And then, we'll go to docs. And then you see API reference documentation. And here we go. This is, it's not really searchable, which is unfortunate, but let's see, file. Okay, file system. So this is all the things that you can do. If this feels like a wall of information, that's okay, just use Stack Overflow. All right, so back to Express. All right, so Express is nice because it's just a page of all the things that you can do. So we're going to search for res.render, and we see this clickable link. And okay, here we go, res.render. So the first parameter is a view, which I'll describe in a second, and then an optional parameter of locals and an optional parameter of callback. So we've skipped the optional locals parameter, and we've just added a callback argument. So I'll describe what a view is in a second. But so what we're doing here is or let's see what it says. Renders a view and sends HTML to the client. Okay, that makes sense, right? Because here it doesn't really look like nice HTML, but it is. And we'll see an example in like 2 seconds of not HTML. Okay, so another thing you can do is, we'll be done with this for a second. Okay, cool. So we're going to try 2 things. First, let's not use res.render. Let's use res.send. Hello world. Yeah, okay. So let's see what happens now. Well, I actually got the same thing. So what went wrong here? Why am I getting the same thing that I got before?
You're still running.
Yeah, exactly. I'm still running. So whenever you create your routes or most parts of your app, the actual app is being created whenever Node reads your app for the first time, which is here. Whenever you make changes, this is just making changes to the actual text, right? Text file that you're storing in your file system. But you're not actually changing this program that's running right here, that's running your web app. So what you actually have to do, right, is, as I've been doing previously, restart it, cancel out and restart your web app. And there we go, hello world. So this isn't HTML. So you see how before it was sort of like, it was very plain, but this is strictly just text, right? This is the most basic thing that you can send back. Okay. So, and one other point. It gets pretty tedious to make changes and then cancel out and then restart, right? There are things that you can look up. So I recommend NodeDaemon/NodeMon. It's the same thing. It's spelled NodeMon, and then you just do bin/www. It'll do the same thing, but it'll restart your server for you. Not super important, but if you want to, feel free to look it up. Okay, so now one other thing. Let's change this back. All right, we're going to this one we use. Okay. Which is what we're doing right now. All right, cool. So this is rendering the view index. So let's look back at. Okay, so views. Let's look at what is in views. All right, so we have error, index, and layout. .hbs just means they're handlebars files. So let's look at index because that's what we sent right previously. And let's look at. Okay. Okay, so we have a header 1, which is, let's actually run it again. Okay, so header 1, which is our title, and remember down here, this second parameter, argument that we pass to res.render is an object of key value pairs, where the key is the name of something that we want to replace, and then the value is the value we want to set there. So this index.hbs file it's really just HTML, but it's sort of like HTML with some nice features, right? And the features for handlebars are anytime you see these double brackets, these like handlebar mustaches you could think of, anytime you see those, it means that everything between those brackets it's going to replace using handlebar syntax. And we'll go into how that works during tomorrow's lecture. But you can see here that this is a header 1 that makes it big. This is a paragraph that means it's a normal text. Welcome to title. And this isn't title, right? And this isn't title because we're replacing it with express here. So if we change this to someone's name, such as Yolanda, and we restart the server, the change is, right, this was the title and this was the title. Instead we have Yolanda, welcome to Yolanda. Okay, you see how we change that? Let's change it back. Okay, cool. We'll go over these views a lot more tomorrow. But that's just a general idea of how they're hooked up together. Okay. Okay, so that's views. All right, last thing is public. So we have this public directory right here. So let's see what's inside of it. Actually, let's do this. Okay, so here we go. Public. Public has 3 folders: images, JavaScripts, and style sheets. It slightly bothers me that JavaScripts is plural, but I guess following patterns. So these 2 directories are empty, and this directory has 1 folder. It's called style.css. So as you might imagine, JavaScripts holds JavaScript scripts that you can run in, well, let me back up. The point of the public folder, is it's saying, I want people to be able to access these files just as is. But generally, it's not for the purpose of people accessing them directly, but rather for the purpose of your other parts of your app accessing them. So like your style sheet, right? This style sheet is what's making this look different than the text that we had earlier, right? The hello world text. It's styling it to some degree, and that's from this. So this is like public assets, images, JavaScript, style sheets. So we'll do style sheets first. Style sheets is just CSS files, right? JavaScript is just JavaScript files that are going to be run in the browser. And then images. In production, you generally won't have images stored in your repository. It's not the best practice, but for our projects, it makes it easy. It keeps it all in the same place. It's free. So unless you're storing like a large number of very high quality images, feel free to just put whatever images you want to reference within your app in this images folder. And Git will know how to handle your image as a binary file. Okay, so something cool that Express Generator has set up for us is we see how it's style sheets and style.css. We can actually go here /style sheets /style.css. And this is our style sheet. Now, generally it's not, you're not like exposing this to the public because you want users to visit this page. It's like okay if they do because they're trying to look around and stuff. That's fine. The point of it is that other parts of your site can use this. Yeah, but if you ever are frustrated, like, oh, why isn't something working? Is this asset like a style sheet or a JavaScript that I think is getting pushed to the client? Is that actually getting pushed? This is how you can check. Okay, that's pretty much it. We finished a little bit early, but let me give a quick final conclusion word. This is a very basic web app, right? This is a Hello World web app. In the second part, we're going to actually download a web app that the staff has created. It's also pretty basic, but it'll have some functionality. And together, for the first part of part 2, I'm going to show you how to add things like routes, add NPM packages and stuff like that. And then you can go ahead and in the second part of part 2, try your hand at those on your own. But for now, the summary of part 1 is we finally have our own web app up and running, which is really cool. If parts of it were confusing, remember 3 things. 1, jump in. Even if things are confusing or you don't really necessarily know everything that's going on, just try things and try your best because that's how you learn. Like, I took this class last year and I had never done this before and I had no idea what I was doing. And 1 year later, because I took the class and because I did other things and practiced and failed a lot, I understand pretty much what's going on. Not everything, but that's the point, right? You continuously learn. Second, it's always a good idea to read the documentation. Don't feel like you have to read everything, but if you have no idea what's going on, the best place to start is Express documentation. And then you go up here and you see Home, Getting Started. This is a nice small Hello World Express app. This is how routing works, right? This is how middleware works. This is how templating engines work, right? We're going to go over these with you, but if you get stuck or you're super confused, always feel free to read the documentation. But third and finally, ask questions. Post on Piazza, ask your teammates, ask friends, ask us, right? If you get stuck or you're confused or you just want to ask about something specific or in general, always ask us. Okay, cool. That's all that I have. Thanks for your time and see you after lunch.